Time for another Coffee with Kilroy on Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. It's a twofer, or what I like to call beverage in a book, sci-fi style. The beverage? Coffee, of course. Whatever you are drinking, I hope you're enjoying it. The book, iVirus, a D66 Gamebook from Adam C. Mitchell. Now, I did a piece earlier on another one of Mr. Mitchell's books, General Quarters, a D66 Gamebook adventure, and this is where you play a World War II submarine captain, and it is kind of a choose-your-own-adventure type book, but generated or kind of facilitated through dice. Dice are making some of your decisions or moving the narrative forward more so than just making decisions. So that got me thinking or looking at what other books are out there that this author might have, because this is kind of a unique space. I mean, Choose Your Own Adventure is not a unique space, but having it primarily generated by dice and dice rolls, with to the extent that it is in his D66 game books, it is somewhat unique. So I was looking around and I found iVirus. And in fact, I contacted Mr. Mitchell through social media, and he mentioned this book as well. Now, this book presents quite a few quandaries, quite a few issues that we probably need to explore. First off, you play the virus. Yeah, really. Given everything that we've gone through and what we're still going through and the effects of that, yeah, you play the virus. So you need to know that up front before you get into this. Is that something you want to get into? And that harkens back to a discussion that Dan from No Enemies Here and Gary from Ardwolf's Lair and I discussed on an episode several weeks ago on ungamables, and are there certain situations that you cannot game. And this might fall into that category. It definitely falls into that category for some. I mean, some people would not want to, even if you are inclined to play solitaire games or book games, you might not want to play this topic, and that's completely understandable. So, and I'll put a link to that ungamable discussion down below. But so that's one aspect here, is that you're playing the virus. And this, not only does that come up from the standpoint of potential ungamable, it also comes up from the standpoint of, or is akin to some of the discussions that have been out there in the wargaming field, especially when, Zero Leader was released, and then Stuka Leader, playing the other side. And do you really want to play the other side, or the side that was not necessarily the open quote good guy in the conflict? And so, and people have issues with that, and people come down on both sides of that. Some people think that it's perfectly fine, you're trying to play it for history, you're trying to learn something, and that's fine. And other people are, nah, I just don't want to go there. And that those same arguments kind of fit into this book as well, or this topic, because what are you trying to do here? And we'll dive into this book a little bit here, but one of the things that this book does, and I don't know how well it's researched or how accurate of a simulation it is, but it puts you in the position of the virus, and so you're encountering the efforts to curb you and to limit your effect and to eliminate you or cure you. But there's all the trappings of your different type of medical or biological makeup of the virus and its different factors. So there's some science here. And again, I don't know how strong that is or how accurate that is, but I think you can learn something here. There's a potential to learn something from this, and so that goes back to the old argument. Well, I play it because I'm trying to learn something, and I'm a big fan of trying to learn different things and learn things through science. And so that brings us to another aspect of this book. I mean, my family and I, we've played all kinds of, and these aren't all of them, but we played all kinds of science-based games, or games where, you're learning about science and you're trying to learn about how things are put together, and you're learning about it in a fun way. Fun, you're the virus here, right? But you're learning about it in an interesting and engaging way. And so this book kind of potentially fits into that aspect of learning and learning about science and how it plays out. Also, the whole aspect about playing the virus, especially in today's age. Well, there are other games out there that you deal with this topic. You deal with a pandemic or an epidemic, and you're dealing with how to fight the virus. And probably the most prominent of all those, or the most widely played and sold, is Pandemic. And there's all kinds of different iterations of Pandemic and other games out there that kind of deal with this topic. But in those games, you're playing against the virus. The virus is the AI, and here the AI is the scientist. The AI is the medical community, right? And so it's flipped, and that's not unheard of. I would say. I mean, there's even a pandemic variant where you are the contagion, and so in some respects, this book is a continuation of the situation where you are playing as the virus. So with all that, I just thought I'd get that out before we dive into this book, because you might sit there and say, wow, what are we looking at here at the while we're still in and trying to get out of a pandemic. So with that, let's go down a little bit here so I get a little bit closer to the book and we can page through. With all that, man, I need a sip. So I got a little bit of a spill there. So anyway, let's page through this. If you're familiar with or if you recall, and I'll put a link to this in down below too, but Mr. Mitchell's other book, this is a D66 Gamebook, so it's going to be primarily facilitated or driven by dice rolls. Here's your table of contents, breaks it out, and this is a little bit more extensive or different than the General Quarters book, which again was based on a World War II submarine captain in the Pacific. This one, again, you are the virus. So this one has a little bit more role-playing aspects of building up your character, or your in this case, your virus. And so you have, building up what your contagion and your resistance, and then the people that are going to be fighting you, they're going to have kind of corollary or opposite type effects of drug and research to your traits and abilities. Then this talks about completing the adventure, lethality, viral DNA traits, and this is what I was talking about, getting into. There's certain modifiers, respiratory, circulatory, renal, digestive, and then there's viral DNA traits, and this is what I was talking about. This getting more into the science and a little bit more involved and detailed than General Quarters. Because you're developing what is the game space. World War II, we know what the game space is, right? You're a submarine captain, and you're trying to avoid being destroyed or found, and at the same time trying to find enemy ships and destroy them. This one is you're trying to grow and evolve as a virus and spread, and there are different ways of which they're going to be combating you and taking you out. So it's a different conflict that's going on, and so they have to kind of explain it in the scientific terms in which it's happening. And then this talks about how these different there's your viral DNA traits, and this is how they work. And then it goes into how you play this game book. Talks about the dice. So that's all the basic setup. Here, but you have a different kind of character sheet, I should say. Here you've got this encounters track. You have your stats here. You have transportation links, patient X. So this is how it all gets started, and then starts. You're going to start moving through that person to other people, cities, and the like. So again, very reminiscent of the pandemic, but in reverse, right? This is more, similar to, pandemic contagion in that regards. So the pandemic, the game, I should say, if we're just to be clear there. So, and then you have the journey, and I'm not going to page through too much because there are spoilers, because this is a narrative-driven game with a with the mechanism of dice kind of pushing it forward. So here's you got to determine your patient zero, or sorry, patient X, I should say here. Patient zero is another term that's been used in science, but you have patient X here. Then there's the different tables for the different people, and this is basically how it's spread. So as you can see right now, you have a few more charts with a lot more detail that's going on here than you would have in Rex the dog, than what you would have in general quarters, which general quarters has more like what you would the typical combat us war gamers would expect. So then you have, again, these are the dice numbers. So you like on a D6, and I remember playing this back in, I don't know if it was Avalon Hill games, but a lot of games back then, you would use 2 dice and 2 6-sided dice, and one would be one color, one would be another color, and you just read it that way. So you'd have a results of 1 to 6 and then 1 to 6. So you have anywhere from 11 to 66 on the dice. Reading or result, and then that's what these different chapters are, I believe, that kind of move some of that forward. So I'm not going to page through there because there's quite a bit of kind of a spoiler potentially of how this plays through. So anyway, that is the so that is I'm not going to so the rest of these are like open charts here, or open sheets, that you can, blank sheets that you can fill out or mark or copy or whatever you want to do with that. But there is quite a bit of, there's more illustrations in this game than there are in general quarters. So this is a little bit more thematic in that regards. But again, this is a different space to kind of wrap your head around. I mean, you're playing the opposite of what's going on right now, or the opposite of what we want to happen. Here's the back of the book. It all starts here. History has repeatedly proven that the human race is susceptible to becoming infected by viruses, often by inhaling the smallest particles expelled when another person coughs, for instance, and then become sick several days later as these viruses divide and grow within our body. Some viruses become a mere cold or flu, while others mutate and cause serious harm. Some kill. You are one of these viruses, and like others of your kind, you must spread and mutate to survive. You are no ordinary virus, however. You are sentient. This is part of the story, part of the game, and you are a hero of sorts. A pencil and eraser of 2 standard dice is all you need to start spreading your viral wings. So, again, this fits into the sci-fi vibe of my Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. Again, for all the things I said before, this might not be your cup of tea or your cup of joe, which I need to have some. As the subject matter and the topic matter here might not be something that you just feel should be gamed. It might be something that you're too sensitive to. It might be goes back to the arguments of playing the other side, so to speak. The fact that it's solo and it's kind of a choose your own adventure somewhat type format, those are all reasons why you might not want to play this. So why would you want to play this? Well, if you get over that hump of those aspects, then it's an interesting system. It's I mean, again, if you rather enjoy it, and that's a loose term with respect to this book, but if you'd rather experience it in a war game setting, then this one might be more to your liking. But there is something to be offered here. It's interesting how it's played out. It's interesting how it's developed. Again, I don't know what the efficacy of the science is in this, but there is some at least base groundwork that seems reasonable, logical, and how it plays out, or how it develops. So if you get over the hump of some of those other detractors, then I think there is something in here that's interesting to look into, something to get into and experience. I don't know if this is something that you really enjoy, but then again, I mean, some people feel that way about war games. How do you enjoy a war game? How do you enjoy, you know, the combat or the effect of war? And and that's a good criticism out there. For me, it's about the learning experience. It's about the decisions in the command space and how they were made and how terrain affected that, and morale and the quality of leadership and the combination of arms and how that all played out, and in a historical way. I'm more into the historical side than I am into the hypothetical, but I'll dabble into that as well, and then and experience that. And then when it comes to war games in the sci-fi or fantasy ilk, well, that's different. I mean, that's you're not doing it from a historical standpoint. You're trying to get the theme of it. There's definitely more of a thematic pull in those kind of games, where you're trying to experience a fantasy setting or a sci-fi setting or the expanding of an empire or something like that. A little bit different. I mean, they're not millions of aliens that have died in the cause of you playing that game. So it is different, and it is separated from history and reality in that regard. And so that is where this, I think, is trying to go, is trying to separate you somewhat. I mean, trying to give you somewhat of the reality of the science of viruses, but which we now probably know too well. Others of us might not know well enough, but we know too well and have experienced in a very severe way. But I think it's trying to go into that space, so to speak. And so I think there's something here. You just need to, it's caveat emptor, buyer beware on this. You know what you're getting into. But this is a relatively inexpensive book. Got off Amazon. Got both these off Amazon. That's where I'm getting a lot of my war game books or my game books these days. But which back to Amazon's original business model, right? Books. So so there you have it. That's iVirus. Thought I would share that with you on Coffee with Kilroy and on Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday, and see what you think about that. Love to hear your thoughts on this one. This one is definitely something that very interested in seeing what anybody thinks, not only about the game system, if they've played it, what they think about this D66 game system and as being a different alternative in this game space of solitaire game books, but also this topic. Love to hear thoughts on that, and based on either the science or the theme or the ungamable or playing the other side or any of those type of thoughts. Love to hear what everybody thinks about that, because I think that's an interesting topic for exploration out there. Anyway, that's what I have for you today. I hope that hope this didn't get you too upset or mess up your your morning coffee, or whenever you're watching this. Maybe it's your evening scotch. Each to their own. But I thought I'd share this. I thought this is interesting. It's kind of consistent with some of the stuff I've been doing in this space. So anyway, have a great rest of the day, or evening, or morning, or wherever you're at in the world. I appreciate you very much for even looking at this, even if it's 5 seconds. I appreciate that, because I know your time is precious. And so any amount of time you spend with me, listening to me ramble and rant and say a lot, I appreciate that. I really do. So thank you all. Enjoy. Thanks for watching.